Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, November 11th, 2025, and just a week ago, we saw elections that took place on Tuesday, November 4th, 2025, at which the Democratic Party was ushered in victories all across the country, winning in Virginia, in California, in New York City, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, and so on and so forth, as Democrats really did tremendously well, winning over numerous state and local races and ones that made a difference on the national stage as how we start to see the perception, not just around the Democratic Party, but around Donald Trump and the White House, as we see large swaths of voters that were integral to his success in the last cycle turn away from the GOP in response to what they are seeing in Washington, D.C. Now, the title of this article is quite clear. NBC News reported that Latino voter shifts in Tuesday's elections, referring to what took place a week ago, alarmed some Republicans. And that is exactly what is the case. Republicans ranging from representatives in Florida to other GOP advisors across the country recognize that at this moment, the GOP is at a crossroads where they can either continue to win amongst key demographics that are the reason they won the last presidential cycle, or lose them in 2026, just as they did in 2025. Now, if you remember the 2024 election, you might remember that Donald Trump won every single battleground state. But something that is lost on this, as we've talked a lot about where Donald Trump did better relative to his first and second performances for President of the United States, is that white voters in particular, actually in some swing states, found themselves voting to the left of where they were in 2016 and 2020. And that might be surprising, because if Donald Trump is to win the majority of these swing states, in fact, all of them, it stands to reason that he should be improving amongst the majority voting demographic, which in every single one of these states are white voters. But that was not the case. The reason why Donald Trump did so well was because traditional Democratic voting groups did not turn out for Democrats in the same way. In Atlanta, Georgia, we saw that Donald Trump shaved off 10 points of the margin amongst black men. In Michigan, young voters, and just generally speaking, Latino voters, black voters, Asian American voters, you saw generally in Michigan turned away from the Democratic Party. In Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, same thing. In Arizona and Nevada, Texas too, New Mexico. States with very high Hispanic populations saw a massive turn away from Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. And as a response, Donald Trump did well. But less than a year into Donald Trump's first term, his favorability rating amongst Hispanic voters has dropped to a record low, with just roughly a third of Latino voters nationwide approving of the job that Donald Trump is doing. And what the Tuesday election results showed, we can actually look at the visual data here, extends to states like New Jersey, which is a great example, a state with a very high Hispanic population, higher than in the state of Virginia. And what the results show are a pretty clear-cut victory for the Democrats. You see, in the municipalities that are at least 60% Hispanic, you can compare the margins of Kamala Harris versus that of Mikey Sherrill in the 2025 governor's race. Anywhere from West New York to Gutenberg to Union City to Patterson, all across the state, regardless of what it was, you find that Mikey Sherrill, who might I add, was not the best performing Democrat of the state of New Jersey by a mile, right? Joe Biden did better than Mikey Sherrill in the state of New Jersey. And so the fact that she's bringing it back to this point, but it's not reaching Biden 2020 numbers, certainly means there's room to grow. But it shows that in just a year, Mikey Sherrill took Kamala Harris's 17-point margin in Union City and turned it into a 69-point margin. Or West New York, for instance, where Kamala Harris won by 13, but Mikey Sherrill is winning by 57. A better example is in Passaic. I believe that's how you pronounce it. If I'm wrong, let me know, and I'll try to correct it in the future if we talk about it again. But it's a margin where Donald Trump won against Kamala Harris in that municipality by 7 points in 2024. This past Tuesday, Mikey Sherrill won by 26. The point that I take away from this, and I think you should too, is that not only is it just the polling data that shows that Donald Trump is worried, Republicans are scrambling and worried about their status because the election results are showing a dominating effect for the Democratic Party. You are finding that even the conservative municipalities became locked and solid blue, municipalities for the Democratic Party in 2025. The higher end for Kamala Harris was 28 points that turned into a 71-point margin. Her 17-point victory in Union City turned into a 69-point margin for Mikey Sherrill. Wow. And when you think about what that means too, you're talking just generally speaking, significant improvements for the Democrats, not just in the state of New Jersey, but across the board. And looking at the last presidential cycle, when you look at some of these exit polling data, you will find that amongst key demographics, specifically Latino voters, Kamala Harris underperformed Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden. And even looking at, the results here, the reason why she actually held up and was able to get within 140,000 votes of the swing states necessary to win the election was because white voters saw a change between how they voted in 2020, between 2024. But now we are seeing that white voters are also trending towards the Democratic Party, but minority voters in specific are barreling towards them. You are seeing that the Latino voter shifts here aren't just a microcosm of, what's happening in New Jersey politics. It's a microcosm of what's happening on the national level as Donald Trump again hits that record low approval rating. In the 2018 House elections, we saw that the Democrats did well for a variety of reasons. But a big reason was that Donald Trump was so unpopular and doing so poorly amongst key demographics that Democrats were able to win in all different regions, winning the white working class, winning Latino voters, winning black voters, winning Asian voters, winning every single demographic besides white voters on the national stage, but even then making inroads enough that it gave Democrats the opportunity to turn a House map of 241 seats for the GOP to 235 for the Democrats in just 2 years. And so looking to 2026, Republicans are raising the red flag. They see this as clear as day because they know that it is their races on the line if these key demographics that Republicans swore up and down were here to stay for them have already shown signs of abandonment less than 1 year into the administration. And you also see that new data out of Texas released right after the election shows that 1 in 5 Texas Latinos who voted for Trump regret their choice already, with 3 more years to go. When you look at the presidential election in 2024, the biggest shifts in Texas came from all of the counties that came across the southern border. Many of these very populous counties, great examples you'll find across the state here, are ones that shifted by very few amounts because Democrats again were making inroads in this heart of Texas area. But across the southern border, you found counties that in some cases voted for Hillary Clinton by 70, that were voting for Trump by 50 this time around. I mean, you were talking about incomprehensible shifts in seemingly less than 2 elections. But thinking about the fact that it is, again, the reason why Donald Trump did so well in Texas wasn't because this is a state that white voters shifted away from the Democrats. It was Hispanic voters in this state. We can see it more visually speaking, too. I think this is a better example of just what the county shift looks like. On this basis, Texas, compared to 2016, much more red. But compared, you'll see these counties, Star Texas shifted 76 points to the right. 55 points, 54 points, 34 points, right? 74 points. Just massive, massive shifts. When you take a look at actual performance, too, you'll see that it was a lot bluer in 2016, even though Hillary Clinton was, at this point where she was able to win on the national stage in terms of the popular vote. Texas still was only about, 9 points. It was more to the left than what we saw on the national level. But even then, it wasn't because of white voters that actually saw, and we'll see this too. We'll go back to the comparison point here. I think this is a better race. Let's see, compared past elections, 2016 and 2024. I guess I'm just going to have to refresh the page here. But I want you to see that the shifts, again, that brought Donald Trump to a larger margin of victory than 2016 were not the counties that were some of the most populous. Tarrant County actually shifted to the left, right? Kaufman shifted to the left. Ellis shifted to the left. And even Dallas only shifted narrowly to the right. It was all of these counties in the deep south of Texas, ones that historically have been quite favorable for the Democratic Party. And so when you think about now, you see metrics about 1 in 5 Texas Latinos who voted for Trump regret their choice. That number is only going to grow. And when you think about what, lack of enthusiasm looks like, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of these Latino voters that are disaffected with Trump will suddenly vote for the Democratic Party. But it does stand to suggest that they may not be inspired to vote in a midterm. They may not be inspired to vote in an off-cycle election. They may not be inspired to vote for J.D. Vance in years' time. And arguably, if they're angry with the current status of the nation and how their community is being treated, stands to reason that that vote is fairly being withdrawn from the Republicans. And that's also, too, what they acknowledge in this as well, right? Maria Salazar, who comes from the state of Florida, said that this is a wake-up call for the GOP, right? That is something that is absolutely damning for Republicans, as Carlos Jimenez, who is, from the state of Florida, represents Miami, and says that, you know what? He said he'd be less than honest if he told reporters that everything was great for Republicans amongst the Latino community, right? He knows and recognizes as a Republican who has been one of Donald Trump's biggest advocates in Washington, D.C., and a huge representative for him, in terms of Latino support from GOP members of Congress. And what you are finding is that even he admits that these results are alarming, that there is something clearly off that doesn't remind them of 2017, because then they would say, all right, well, it would eventually usher in to Republicans doing better. They are seeing the slippage happen in real time, because at first it was data. At first, it was his approval rating has dropped in March compared to January, and then April. And then it was a special election in Florida, but then it was written off as, oh, it's low turnout. You're not really seeing it. And then it was the summer. Then Donald Trump and the White House ramped up their mass deportations that we saw really barreled his approval rating downwards in terms of domestic immigration policy amongst Latino voters, but also just voters nationally. Then you see now that the economy is viewed in a very negative place nationwide. Voters are abandoning the president, and you are seeing that Donald Trump's ability to win Latino voters has not translated to Republicans' ability to win them over a year later. And many of these municipalities or cities or precincts or counties that Republicans could have previously said a year ago would be quite good for them if they were estimating it based off the last presidential cycle, are no longer finding themselves that way. And that matters. A lot of what we've seen here is that what Donald Trump was able to shift has found its way back towards the Democrats. And if Democrats do return back to the Biden 2020 era numbers, the Clinton 2016 era numbers, combined with this loss in support Republicans have seen amongst the prevailing voter demographic, 70% of voters nationwide are white voters, and Democrats are inching closer and closer in that margin election after election. Biden improved on Clinton's. Harris improved on Biden's. And if that maintains itself, combined with the compounding factors of minority voters nationwide shifting back towards the Democratic Party at record pace, and specifically Latino voters, the Republicans are screwed in 2026. And that's not even an understatement. You are talking about, looking at where we are in terms of national politics. Republicans are losing ground everywhere. But this in and of itself is what I think alarms Republicans the most, because without Latino voters, they don't have a pathway forward in future elections. Because white voters are narrowing that gap, because Democrats are getting higher educated voters with more degrees on their side, higher propensity voters on their side, wealthier voters on their side, right? You are finding that as a coalition, a voting demographic that is historically the most active in getting out and vote, combined with minority voters that could help them boost themselves in low propensity elections like presidentials. That is a recipe for disaster for the Republican Party, and very few Republicans seem to see it. But they are pleading with the White House and Donald Trump to recognize it. Because if they don't, they could be in for a lot of trouble, not just in 2026, but for many elections beyond. And there's far more at stake than just a few House races that are at risk. But that's the first sign of a lot to fall for the Republican Party nationwide. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all